Hello, members, and anyone who is listening over at my podcast. I truly appreciate it. So let's go to the paladin groans and boasts regarding Joan of Arc. We were 25 strong and well equipped. We rode in double file, Joan and her brothers in the centre of the column, with Jean de Metz at the head of it, and the Sieur Bertrand at its extreme rear. In 2 or 3 hours we should be in the enemy's country, and then none would venture to desert. By and by we began to hear groans and sobs and execrations from different points along the line, and upon inquiry found that 6 of our men were peasants who had never ridden a horse before, and were finding it very difficult to stay in their saddles. Moreover, we were now beginning to suffer considerable bodily torture. There had been seized by the governor at the last moment and pressed into service to make up the tale, and he had placed a veteran alongside of each with orders to help him stick to the saddle and kill him if he tried to desert. These poor devils had kept quiet as long as they could, but their physical miseries were become so sharp by this time that they were obliged to give them vent. But we were within the enemy's country now, so there was no help for them. They must continue the march. Though Joan said that if they chose to take the risk, they might depart, they preferred to stay with us. We modified our pace now, and moved cautiously. The new men were warned to keep their sorrows to themselves and not get the command into danger with their curses and lamentations. Toward dawn, we rode deep into a forest, and soon all but the sentries were sound asleep, in spite of the cold ground and the frosty air. I woke at noon out of such a solid and stupefying sleep that at first my wits were all astray. I did not know where I was nor what had been happening. Then my senses cleared and I remembered. As I lay there thinking over the strange events of the past month or two, the thought came into my mind, greatly surprising me, that one of Joan's prophecies had failed. For where were Noel and the paladin, who were to join us at the 11th hour? By this time, you see, I'd gotten used to expecting everything Joan said to come true, so being disturbed and troubled by these thoughts, I opened my eyes. Well, there stood the paladin, leaning against a tree, looking down on me. How often that happens, you think of a person, or to speak of a person, and there he stands before you, and you not dreaming he is near. It looks as if his being near is really the thing that makes you think of him, and not just an accident, as some people imagine. Well, be that as it may, there was the paladin. Anyway, looking down in my face and waiting for me to wake, I was ever so glad to see him, and jumped up and shook him by the hand and led him a little way from the camp, he limping like a cripple, and told him to sit down, and said, "Now, where have you dropped from? And how did you happen to light in this place? And what do those soldier clothes mean? Tell me all about it," he answered. "I marched with you last night." "No," to myself I said. The prophecy has not all failed. Half of it has come true. Yes, it did. I hurried up from Domremy to join, and was within a half of a minute being too late. In fact, I was too late, but I beg so hard that the governor was touched by my brave devotion to my country's cause. Those are the words he used, and so he yielded. Allow me to come. I thought to myself, this is a lie. He is one of the 6 the governor recruited by force at the last moment. I know it, for Joan's prophet said he would join at the 11th hour, but not by his own desire. Then I said aloud, "I'm glad you came. It is a noble cause, and one should not sit at home in times like this." Sit at home? I could do more do it than the thunderstone could stay hid in the clouds when the storm calls it. That is the right talk. He sounds like you. That pleased him. I'm glad you know me. Some don't, but they will presently. They will know me well enough before I get done with this war. That is what I think. I believe that wherever danger confronts you, you will make yourself conspicuous. He was charmed with his speech, and it swelled him up like a bladder. He said, "If I know myself, and I think I do, my performances in this campaign will give you occasion and more than once to remember those words. I were a fool to doubt it, that I know. I shall not be at my best, being but a common soldier. Still, the country will hear of me. If I were where I belong, if I were in the place of La Hire, or Saint Thérèse, or the Bastard of Orleans, well, I say nothing. I am not of the talking kind, like Noel, Rengisson, and his sort. I thank God, but it will be something, I take it, a novelty in this world, I should say, to raise the fame of a private soldier above theirs and extinguish the glory of their names with its shadow. Why, look here, my friend, I said. Do you know that you have hit out a most remarkable idea there? Do you realize the gigantic proportions of it? For, look you, to be a general of the vast renown, what is that? Nothing. History is clogged and confused with them. One cannot keep their names in his memory. There are so many. But a common soldier of supreme renown, why, he would stand alone. He would be the one, the moon in a firmament of mustard-seed stars. His name would outlast the human race, my friend. And who gave you that idea? He was ready to burst with happiness, but he was suppressed. Betrayal of it well as he could. He simply waved the complaint aside with his hand and said, with complacency, "It is nothing. I have them often, ideas like that, and even greater ones. I do not consider at all this one much." "You astonish me. You do indeed. So it is really your own?" "Quite. There's plenty more where it came from," tapping his head with his finger and taking occasion at the same time to cant his morion over his right here, which gave him a very satisfied air. "I do not need to borrow my ideas like Noel or Regisson. Speaking of Noel, when did you see him last?" "Half an hour ago, sleeping yonder like a corpse. He rode with us last night." I felt a great upleap in my heart, and I said to myself, now I am at rest and glad. I will never doubt her prophecies again. Then I said aloud, "It gives me joy. He makes me proud of our village. There is not keeping our lion hearts at home in these great times. I see that." "A lion heart? Who? That baby? Why, he begged like a dog to be let off. Cried and said he wanted to go to his mother. Him a lion heart? That tumble-bag. Dear me. Why, I supposed he volunteered, of course, didn't he?" "Oh, yes, he volunteered the way people do to the headsman. Why, when he found I was coming up from Domremy to volunteer, he asked me to let him come along in my protection, and see the crowds and the excitement. Well, we arrived and saw the torches filing out of the castle, and ran there. Then the governor had him seized, along with 4 more, and he begged to be let off, and I begged for his place, and at last the governor allowed me to join, but wouldn't let Noel off, because he was disgusted with him. He was such a cry-baby. Yes, much good he'll do the king's service. He'll eat for 6 and run for 16. I ate the pygmy, with half a heart and 9 stomachs." "Why, this is very surprising news to me, and I am sorry and disappointed to hear it. I thought he was a manly fellow." The paladin gave me an outraged look and said, "I don't see how you can talk like that." "I'm sure I don't. I don't see how you could have got such a notion. I don't dislike him. I'm not saying these things out of prejudice, for I don't allow myself to have prejudices against people. I like him. I've always comraded with him from the cradle, but he must allow me to speak my mind about his faults, and I'm willing. He shall speak about mine, if I have any. And true enough, maybe I have, but I reckon they'll bear inspection. I have that idea anyway. A manly fellow. You should have heard him whine and wail and swear last night because the saddle hurt him. Why didn't the saddle hurt me? Pooh! I was as much at home in it as I had been born there, and yet it was the first time I ever rode on a horse. All these old soldiers admired my riding. They said they had never seen anything quite like it, but him, why, they had to hold him on all the time." An odour, as of breakfast, came stealing through the wood. The paladin unconsciously inflated his nostrils in lustful response and got up and limped painfully away, saying he must go and look to his horse. At bottom he was all right, and a good-hearted giant, without any harm in him, for it was no harm to bark, if one steps there and does not bite. And it's no harm to be an ass if one is content to bray and not to kick. If this vast structure of brawn and muscle and vanity and foolishness seemed to have a Liby's tongue, what of it? There was no malice behind it, and besides, the defect was not of his own creation. It was the work of Noel Raguisson, who had nurtured it, fostered it, built it up, perfected it, for the entertainment he got out of it. His careless, light heart had to have somebody to nag and chaff and make fun of. The paladin had only needed development to order, to meet its requirements. Consequently, the developed was taken in hand and diligently attended to and looked after, nat and bull fashion, for years, to the neglect and damage of far more important concerns. The result was an unqualified success. Noel prized the society of the paladin above everybody else's. The paladin preferred anybody's to Noel's. The big fellow was often seen with the little fellow, and it was for the same reason that the bull is often seen with the gnat. With the first opportunity, I had to talk with Noel. I welcomed him to the expedition and said, "It was fine and brave of you to volunteer, Noel." His eye twinkled and he answered, "Yes, it was rather fine, I think. Still, the credit doesn't all belong to me. I had help." "Who helped you?" "The governor." "How?" "Well, I'll tell you the whole thing. I came up from Domremy to see the crowds and the general show, for I hadn't ever experienced such things, of course, and this was a great opportunity, but I hadn't any mind to volunteer. I overtook the paladin on the road and let him have my company the rest of the way, although he did not want it, and said so. And while we were gawking and blinking in the glare of the governor's torches, they seized us, and 4 more, and added us to the escort. And that is really how I came to be a volunteer. But after all, I wasn't sorry. Remember how dull life would have been in the village without the paladin." "How did he feel about it? Was he satisfied?" "I think he was glad." "Why?" "Because he said he wasn't. He said, taken by surprise, you see, and it is not likely that he could tell the truth without preparation. Not that he would have prepared, if he had the chance, for I do not think he would. I am not charging with him that. In the space of time that he could prepare to speak the truth, he could also prepare to lie. Besides, his judgment would be cool then, and would warn him against fooling with new methods in an emergency. So I'm sure glad he was glad, because he said he wasn't." "Did you think he was very glad?" "Yeah, I know he was. He begged like a slave, and bawled for his mother. He said his health was delicate, and he didn't know how to ride a horse, and he knew he couldn't outlive the first march, but really he wasn't looking as delicate as he was feeling. There was a cask of wine there, a proper lift for 4 men. The governor's temper got afire, and he delivered an oath at him that knocked up the dust where it struck the ground, and told him to shoulder the cask, or he would carve him to cutlets and send him home in a basket. The paladin did it. That secured his promotion to the privacy and the escort without any further debate." "Yes, you seem to make it quite plain that he was glad to join, that is, if your premises are right, that you start from. How did he stand the march last night?" "About as I did. If he made the more noise, it was a privilege of his bulk. We stayed in our saddles because we had help. We were equally lame today. And if he likes to sit down, let him. I prefer to stand." I hope you understand that, guys. Basically, the paladin, we know, right, by now, their friend the paladin likes to be extravagant, and he likes to say all this stuff. And he's gone and told Joan's best friend how he went to the governor and he begged to join the force and everything. And then his friends come along, who the paladin doesn't really like very much, and has told the truth and basically said, well, we both didn't like it, but we're both forced to do it. And we both had help on his horses because we weren't very good at it. And the paladin's made out that it's all Noel, you know. Noel's the one that cried and, you know, he couldn't ride. It was a pair of them that were both as bad as each other. But that's kind of like how it happens in real life, I suppose. Even today you get those, don't you, that come with these very wild, entertaining stories. And you know that it's not the truth, but at the same time, it's not exactly a lie because they're only speaking of the other person. And they're not doing any harm about it. They're just not being wholly truthful, you know. Anyway, let's look at Joan as we head towards the enemy, which is quite an important time, isn't it, really? We were called to quarters and subjected to a search and inspection by Joan. Then she made a short little talk, into which she had said that even the rude business of war could be conducted better without profanity and other brutalities of speech than with them, and that she should strictly require us to remember and apply this admonition. She ordered half an hour's horsemanship drill for the novices then, and appointed one of the veterans to conduct it. It was a ridiculous exhibition, but we learned something, and Joan was satisfied and complimented us all. She did not take any instruction herself to go through the evolutions and manoeuvres, but merely sat her horse like a martial little statue and looked on. That was sufficient for her, you see. She would not miss or forget a detail of the lesson. She would take it all in with her eye and mind, and apply it afterwards with as much certainty and confidence as she had already practised it. We now made 3 night marches of 12 to 13 leagues each, riding in peace and undisturbed, being taken from a roving band of free companions. Country folk were glad to have that sort of people go by without stopping. Still, they were very worrying and wearying marches. Not comfortable at all, for the bridges were few and the streams many, and as we had to ford them we found the water dismally cold, and afterward had to bed ourselves, still wet, on the frosty or snowy ground, to get warm as we might sleep if we could, for it would not have been prudent to build fires. Our energies languished under these hardships and deadly fatigues, but Joan's did not. Her step kept its spring and firmness, and her eye its fire. We could only wonder at this. We could not explain it. But if we had had hard times before, I know not what to call the 5 nights that now followed, for the marches were fatiguing, the baths as cold, and we were ambuscaded 7 times in addition, lost 2 novices and 3 veterans in the resulting fights. The news had leaked, gone abroad, that the inspired version of Vaucouleurs were making for the king with an escort, and all the roads were being watched now. These 5 nights disheartened the command a good deal. This was aggravated by a discovery which Noel made, and which he promptly made known at headquarters. Some of the men had been trying to understand why Joan continued to be alert, vigorous and confident, while the strongest men in the company were flagged with heavy marches and exposure and were become morose and irritable. There it shows you how men can have eyes and yet not see. All their lives those men had seen their own women folks hitched up with a cow and dragging the plough in the fields while the men did the driving. They'd also seen other evidences that women have far more endurance and patience and fortitude than men. But what good had their seeing these things been to them? None. It had taught them nothing. They were still surprised to see a girl of 17 bear the fatigues of war better than trained veterans of the army. And moreover, they did not reflect that a great soul with a great purpose can make a weak body strong and keep it so. And here was the greatest soul in the universe. But how could they know that? Those dumb creatures. No, they knew nothing, and their reasonings were of a piece with their ignorance. They argued and discussed among themselves with no listening, and arrived at the decision. Are you ready, guys? They arrived at the decision Joan was a witch. These are her own people. These are her own community. The people she is fighting for. And already they have named her a witch because she has more endurance than them. Let me tell you something. A man has strength, yes, he does. He boulders on, but a woman has the emotional strength. Not the physical, maybe not, but she has the spiritual strength. She has the strength of the mind and the emotional strength, the strength of the heart. And she puts all those together, and I will tell you, that makes a woman strong. It makes her able to endure just what a man can. And that's just how it is, but it's her own people. Had a strange pluck and strength from Satan, apparently. So they made a plan to watch for a safe opportunity to kill her, take her life, her own people. To have secret plottings of this sort going on in our midst was very serious business. Of course, the knights asked Joan's permission to hang the plotters, but she refused without hesitancy. She said, "Neither these men nor any others can take my life before my mission is accomplished. Therefore, why should I have their blood upon my hands? I will inform them of this, and also admonish them. Call them before me." When they came, she made that statement to them in plain matter of fact, and just as if she thought, never entertained her mind that anyone could doubt it after she had given her word that it was true. The men were evidently amazed and impressed to hear her say such a thing in such sure and confident way, for prophecies, boldly uttered, never fall barren on superstitious ears. Yes, this speech certainly impressed them, but her closing remark impressed them still more. It was for the ringleader that Joan said it sorrowfully. "It is a pity that you should plot another's death when your own is so close at hand. That man's horse stumbled and fell on him in the first ford which we crossed that night, and he was drowned before we could help him. We had no more conspiracies. This night was harassed with ambuscades, but we got through without having any men killed. One more night would carry us over the hostile frontier, if we had good luck. We saw the night close down with a good deal of solitude. Always before we had been more or less reluctant to start out into the gloom and the silence, to be frozen in the fords and persecuted by the enemy. But this time we were impatient to get under way and have it over, although there was promise of more and harder fighting than any of the previous nights had furnished. Moreover, in the front of us, about 3 leagues, there was a deep stream with a frail wooden bridge over it, and as cold rain mixed with snow had been falling steadily all day, we were anxious to find out whether we were in a trap or not. If the swollen stream had washed away the bridge, we might properly consider ourselves trapped and cut off from escape. As soon as it was dark, we filed out from the depth of the forest, where we'd been hidden, and began to march. From the time we had begun to encounter ambushes, Joan had ridden at the head of the column, and she took this post now. By the time we had gone a league, the rain and snow had turned to sleet, and under the impulse of storm wind it lashed my face like whips, and I envied Joan and the knights, who could close their visors and shut up their heads with their helmets, as in a box. Now, out of the pitchy darkness and close at hand, came the sharp command, "Halt!" We obeyed. I made out a dim mass in front of us, which might be the body of a horseman, but one could not be sure. A man rode up and said to Joan in a tone of proof, "Well, you've taken your time, truly, and what have you found out? Is she still behind us, or in front?" Joan answered in a level voice, "She is still behind." This news softened the stranger's tone. He said, "If you know that to be true, you have not lost your time, Captain. But are you sure?" "How do you know?" "Because I've seen her." "Seen her? Seen the Virgin herself?" "Yes. I have been in her camp." "Is it possible, Captain Raymond? I ask you to pardon me for speaking in that tone just now. You have performed a daring and admirable service where she was camped?" "In the forest, not far from the league from here." "Good. I was afraid we might still be behind her, but now we know she is behind us. Everything is safe. She is our game. We will hang her. You shall hang her yourself. No one has so well earned the privilege of abolishing the pestilent limb of Satan. I do not know how to thank you sufficiently. If we catch her, if I will take care of that. Give yourself no uneasiness. All I want is just a look at her, to see what the imp is like that has been able to make all this noise. Then you and the altar may have her. How many men has she?" "Counted but 18, but she may have had 2 or 3 pickets out." "Is that all?" It won't be a mouthful for my force. It is true that she's only a girl. Yes, she is no more than 17. It passes belief. Is she robust or slender? Slender. The officer pondered a moment or two. Then he said, was she preparing to break camp? Not when I had my last glimpse of her. What was she doing? She was talking quietly with an officer. Quietly? Not giving orders? No, talking quietly as we are now. That is good. She's feeling a false security. She would have been restless and fussy else. It is a way of her sex when danger is about. She was making no preparation to break camp. She certainly was not when I saw her last. She was chatting quietly and at ease. It means that this weather is not to her taste. Night marching in sleet and wind is not for chits of 17. No, she will stay where she is. She has my thanks. We will camp ourselves here. It's as good a place as any. Let us get about it. If you command it, certainly. But she has 2 knights with her. They might force her to march, particularly if the weather should improve. I was scared and impatient to be getting out of this peril, and it distressed and worried me to have Joan apparently set herself to work to make delay and increase the danger. Still, I thought she probably knew better than I what to do. The officer said, well, in that case, we are here to block the way. Yes, if they come this way, but if they should send out spies and find out enough to make them want to try for the bridge through the woods, it is best to allow the bridge to stand. It made me shiver to hear her. The officer considered a while and said, it might be well enough to send a force to destroy the bridge. I was intending to occupy it with the whole command, but that is not necessary now. Joan said, tranquilly, with your permission, I will go and destroy it myself. Oh, now I saw her idea, and was glad she had the cleverness to invent it, and the ability to keep her head cool and think of it in that tight place. The officer replied, you have it, Captain, and my thanks. With you, do it. It will be well done. I could send another in your place, but not a better. They saluted, and we moved forward. I breathed freer. A dozen times I had imagined I heard the hoofbeats of the real Captain Raymond's troops arriving behind us, and had been sitting on pins and needles all the while that the conversation was dragging along. I breathed freer, but was still not comfortable, for Joan had given only the simple command, forward. Consequently, we moved in a dead walk past a dim and lengthening column of enemies at our side. The suspense was exhausting, yet it lasted but a short while. When the enemy's bugles sang the dismount, Joan gave the word to trot, and that was a great relief to me. She was always at herself, you see. Before the command to dismount had been given, somebody might have wanted the countersign somewhere along that line, if we came flying by at speed. But now we seemed to be on our way to our allotted camping position, so we were allowed to pass unchallenged. The further we went, the more formidable was the strength revealed by the hostile force. Perhaps it was only 100 or 2, but to me it seemed 1,000. When we passed the last of these people I was thankful, and the deeper we ploughed into darkness beyond them, the better I felt. I came nearer and nearer, feeling good. For an hour, then we found the bridge still standing, and I felt entirely good. We crossed it and destroyed it, and then I felt, but I cannot describe what I felt. One has to feel himself in order to know what it's like. We had expected to hear the rush of pursuing force behind us, for the thought that the real Captain Raymond would arrive and suggest that perhaps the troop that had been mistaken for his belonged to the Virgin of Vaucouleurs. But he must have been delayed seriously, for when we resumed our march beyond the river there was no sounds behind us except those which the storm was finishing. I said that Joan had harvested a good many compliments intended for Captain Raymond, and that he would find nothing of a crop left, a dry stubble of reprimands when he got back, and a commander just in the humour to superintend the gathering of it in. Joan said, it will be as you say, no doubt, for the commander took a troop for granted. In the night and unchallenged, and would have camped without sending a force to destroy the bridge if he had been left unadvised. And none are so ready to find fault with others as those who do things worthy of blame themselves. The Sieur Bertrand was amused at Joan's naive way of referring to her advice, as if it had been a valuable present to a hostile leader who was saved from making a censurable blunder of omission. And then he went on to admire how ingeniously she had deceived that man, and yet had not told him anything that was not truth. This troubled Joan, she said. I thought he was deceiving himself. I forbore to tell him lies, for that would have been wrong. But if my truths deceived him, perhaps that made them lies, and I am to blame. I would, God I knew, if I had done wrong. She was assured that she had done right, and that in the perils and necessities of war deceptions, that help one's own cause and hurt the enemy's were also permissionable. But she was not quite satisfied with that, and thought that even when a great cause was in danger, one ought to have the privilege of trying honourable ways first. Joan said, Joan, you told us yourself that you were going to Uncle Laxart's to nurse his wife, but you didn't say you were going further, yet you did go on to Voncolever. I see now, said Joan, sorrowfully. I told no lie, yet I deceived. I had tried all other ways first, but I could not get away, and I had to get away. My mission required it. I did wrong, I think, and am to blame. She was silent a moment, turning the matter over in her mind, then she added, with quite a decision, but the thing itself was right, and I would do it again. It seemed an over-nice distinction, but nobody said anything. If we had known her as well as she knew herself, and as her later history revealed her to us, we should have perceived that she had a clear meaning there, and that her position was not identical with ours. We were supposing, but occupied a higher plane. She would sacrifice herself, and her best self, that is, her truthfulness, to save her cause. But only that. She would not buy her life at that cost, whereas our war ethics permitted the purchase of our lives, or any mere military advantage, small or great, by deception. Her saying seemed a commonplace at the time, the essence of its meaning escaping us, but one sees now that it contained a principle which lifted it above, and that made it great and fine. Presently the wind died down, the sleet stopped falling, and the cold was less severe. The road became a bog, and the horses laboured through at a walk. They could do no better. As the heavy time wore on, exhaustion overcame us. We slept in our saddles. Not even the dangers that threatened us could keep us awake. This 10th night seemed longer than any of the others. And of course, it was very much the hardest, because we had been accumulating fatigue from the beginning, and more of it on hand now than the previous time. But we were not molested again. When the dull dawn came at last, we saw a river before us, and we knew it was Lure. We entered the town of Gy, and knew we were in the friendly land, with the hostiles all behind us. That was a glad morning for us. We were worn and bedraggled and shabby-looking troop. Still, as always, Joan was the freshest of us all, in both body and spirits. We had averaged above 13 leagues at night, by tortuous and wretched roads. It was a remarkable march, and shows what men can do when they have a leader with a determined purpose and a resolution that never flags, nor ever wavers. And that's the end of this part, guys. Now, that's pretty amazing. So, what happened was, if you didn't understand, is that the enemy were waiting for Joan and, obviously, the troops to pass by. But Joan already knew that the enemies were waiting. However, she also knew that the true captain had got delayed. He was left behind. Obviously, she was speaking to angels, or these light beings. I like to call them light beings. So she already knew that the captain, the real captain of the enemy, would be delayed. So this captain that came up to her did not necessarily know the people that were approaching him, and he sort of thought that they were on the same side. That's why Joan spoke to him, and he let Joan pass. The very woman he was meant to apprehend and hang, he let past. And she crossed the bridge and destroyed it afterwards, so that they would not be able to get across and follow them, would they? And that's what I find pretty amazing. She's 17 years old. She's not even 18 yet, guys. She's leading a fucking army in the worst treacherous weather, right? Leading it strongly. Come face to face with the enemy. Outwitted the enemy. Just carried on. I mean, anybody who cannot see the amazement in that, I don't know where you're looking. I don't know where you're looking. Joan was not a witch, nor a bad person, nor an evil woman who took down the English. The English were rotten. We were rotten people. And that's awful to say because I'm English. But you want to look at torture through times and the pain done by other humans on their own kind. Just look at the English history. Dear Lord. That will show you humans. And we are not very good. We are not what we were supposed to be at all. Thank you for listening. When we come back, obviously we're going to continue. Do bear in mind, this is from Joan of Arc's childhood friend. He was with her from the start to the end. And that's what's important here is I'm not just bringing it from history books. I'm bringing it from a journal that was wrote by her best friend. So it's seen in a completely different light to what history throws out there. Because history can be so very biased. When it's publishing books and putting out theologies and you're doing papers, it can be very biased. This is not so biased. It's not lying about Joan. You know, some people did perceive she was a witch because of the way she handled things. And that's fair enough. I can understand that. But it's giving you the truth. So thank you for listening and many blessings.